Spanish interpretation now, so if anyone would like to use that, it should be available in the bottom. Jesus, can you go ahead and let people know that that's available before I turn it on? Just in Spanish.
Hola, si quisiera escuchar la presentación en español, clique a la opción de abajo donde dice español y será entrado al cuarto de español. Zoom.
All right, we'll go ahead and start that.
Okay, we'll get started then. Thanks for joining us on time, everybody. Probably have a few stragglers coming as we go into the program, but welcome to the Valley Water Collaborative Community Outreach and Stakeholder meeting. We're continuing to combine these two meetings because the updates are pretty consistent amongst not only those groups, but the stakeholder and committees that we have for the Modesto-Turlock Basins. We've got a couple of folks that are just coming in the room now, but we'll go ahead to the next slide. We'll introduce the Valley Water Collaborative staff.
Sorry.
Hey, Perry. Hey.
All right, there we go.
Okay, today we have with Valley Water Collaborative, Maureen Thompson and Wade ongoing. Maureen Thompson is our program manager along with Eva Goyer, and Jesus Nunez is our translator. He's on a separate line here today for those who are Spanish speakers that want to listen to the meeting in that fashion. We'll also have a representative from GEI speaking with us today, giving an update on the management zone implementation plan, Richard Meyerhoff. And then, of course, we have Ludo Scalmanini. Won't be speaking today, but they are the organization, the consulting firm that helps us with our scientific and groundwater monitoring responsibilities. So the agenda pretty short, and we should be able to get it done in less than an hour and a half, but we don't want to end it quickly if there is questions and conversations to carry on. So what we're going to talk about today, I know many of you know the nitrate control program, but in case there's some new folks on the line, we'll do a very brief 30,000 foot view of that. And then we're going to talk about the management zone implementation plan. That is our next big deliverable and plan that's going to be developed for the management zones, Turlock and Modesto groundwater basins. Richard will be joining us for that. And then Maureen and Eva will give an update on the applications and the data management system that we're using at Valley Water. And then I'll come back and give an overview of the outreach activities that we're doing and also the SAFER grant that we've been successful in obtaining. I'll give you an update on how that's coming along. So what's a nitrate control program? And then a little overview of Valley Water Collaborative. So the nitrate control program is, next slide please. The nitrate control program was adopted by the Regional Water Board in 2020. It has 3 overarching goals, that is for all the management zones in the Central Valley. There's 6 of us now, priority 1, and that's to provide safe drinking water where nitrate exceeds the drinking water standard. And then that's an outward-facing activity. Inward-facing is that those entities with waste discharge requirements that have nitrates are responsible for reducing their impacts to groundwater aquifers and water supplies. This is a major component of the plans that we're writing and going to be implementing in the future, are actually currently implementing amongst the various industries that are involved in the program. And then a real long-term goal is to restore groundwater quality and where that's reasonable, feasible, and practicable. And then I want to talk about the management zone approach to implementing the nitrate control program. So there are 2 options for the dischargers. They can go a separate pathway where they file individually and justify and show how their discharges are not impacting groundwater, or they make whole those residents as well who are impacted by nitrate. So our first deliverable report was the early action plan. It was submitted last March, March 8th, 2021. We rolled out our program on May 8th And so we've been in place a good part of almost a good part of a year now, a year and a few weeks. I didn't think about that. We should have a 1-year anniversary. We've been in place. It's gone so fast. And then you'll see the map there. These are the two groundwater basins. We call them Modesto and Turlock basins because that's a DWR designation. So we use that for the designation of these groundwater basins. So the safe drinking water requirements is that we had to put in place an early action plan that is in place until the permanent solutions are developed and implemented. This includes this ongoing outreach to the communities that are impacted by these issues in the Modesto-Turlock Basin, where we've been offering this free residential well testing and then providing replacement water, and in this case, bottled water delivered by Ready Fresh to people who have wells that are above the drinking water standard. And we'll go into a little bit more detail a little later on that. And then this plan that we're going to be talking about here in the rest of the presentation is a long-term drinking water solution. So we were able to get an extension to the nitrate discharge limit. In exchange, we have to put forward plans of how we're going to resolve the nitrate movement past the surface level layer into the groundwater. So we're going to be developing plans for that and creating priorities in the areas where there are the highest nitrates. And then we have to, in our work plans, we already submitted and will be submitting in the future, we'll have to include milestones, timeframes, and other things to outline how we are going to implement these long-term solutions. So Valley Water Collaborative was formed about going almost on 3 years now, 2.5 years. We were formed to enable the dischargers and permit holders in Modesto and Turlock basins to be under one administrative oversight group. We have a board of directors made up of the industries that are participating: ag, dairy, food processors, cities, and wineries. Our office is based here in Modesto, and our mission, as you can see spelled out here in brief, is to implement programs that provide access to safe drinking water for residents, and then protecting and enhancing the quality of groundwater use and drinking water for residents in this region. So the organization is structured in a way that we are currently, as we mentioned, having Modesto and Turlock basins participate in all the entities in those basins. There are priority 2 basins that are in our area, Merced being one, where they're tending to be planning on participating in the organization. We have we're managed by a board of directors. I'm the executive director of the organization. And then we've had a couple of meetings and gatherings with folks on a subcommittee basin level, or a subcommittee basis for the 2 basins, Modesto and Turlock. And we're always seeking information or comments and suggestions on how to improve our program. And they're helping us also facilitate the local outreach to residents. So the program deliverables, sorry about that. One of the first program deliverables is the Management Zone Implementation Plan. Richard Meyerhoff is joining us today. There he is, and he's with GEI Consultants. You can go to the next slide. And Richard's helped us tremendously in their company in helping us put together the plan. The benefit of having GEI work for us is they are also working with a couple of the other management zones. So this is a learning process for all of us. So it's been really great having Richard and his team helping us out. So I'm going to pass the microphone over to Richard, and he's going to go through where we are in our plan development.
Very good. Thank you, Perry. And can everybody hear me okay? I see a nod from Maureen. Okay, thank you. All right, so I'm going to just go through a few slides to kind of put things maybe in a broader perspective of where we are in the big picture of development of management zones. As Perry already noted, we are in the process of establishing a management zone, and there's a series of deliverables that get you there in working with the Central Valley Water Board. The big first heavy lift was a preliminary management proposal, as he mentioned, was delivered on time, March 8th of about a year ago. and they began the early action plan implementation, the EAP, May 8th. And so as he said, a big anniversary coming up on that. We've been somewhat of a holding pattern in terms of continuing to establish the management zone while waiting on the Central Valley Water Board to do its review process. While we wait on the board, the early action plan is implemented. And so the program is going forward as intended by the regulation. Well, we finally did receive notice from the board on February 28th, a couple of weeks ago. They sent a letter to all the proposed management zones in the Central Valley to give them comments, including this for the Modesto and Turlock, a comment letter on what issues they wanted us to focus on in the development of the final management zone proposal. And it also triggered a calendar or a clock, so to speak, that 180 days later, we are to have submitted a final management zone proposal. So that is now due on August 29th of 2022. That document is the key, and that what we do when we submit that is we are telling the board formally now, we want to move forward with the establishment of the Modesto and Turlock management zones, and all the final information that the board needs to take its action are provided in those plans or in this final management zone proposal. Now, once the board receives those, they do go through a public review comment process. So it'll be posted, and there will be, I think, at least a 30-day review process. And then the board will take those comments received from the public, and then it's up to them to decide what happens next. But what we will be waiting on is an acceptance. And that's the words from the regulation. It says that the regional board must accept the final management zone proposal. And when they do that, they then tell us, the management zones, to now prepare the management zone implementation plan. And that's the key plan of what will be done over the next multiple years in terms of managing nitrate and long-term drinking water solutions. So we will begin those plans, and one will be developed for Modesto, one will be developed for Turlock. We'll begin those plans quickly once we receive that acceptance from the board. And then ultimately you submit those plans to the board. They have to review, they have to adopt them and approve them. And of course, implementation for many years begins at that point on the long-term solutions. So next slide. So just in a nutshell, kind of capturing what goes into the final management zone proposal. If you've seen the preliminary management zone proposal, it's a pretty lengthy document with lots of attachments. We will literally take that document, dust it off, open it back up, and then complete it to meet the requirements of what the regulation says has to be submitted with a final management zone proposal. Much of that is actually updates. So we need to go back to the groundwater assessment that's in there, the public water system compliance status, who is participating in the management zone, at least at the preliminary stage. If there are additional participants we need to add into the program, all that information gets updated. In addition, while there's already a governance and funding program going on through the Valley Water Collaborative to implement the program, we need to update that information, make sure it's current when we submit the final proposal. The early action plan gets updated as well. Since May 8th of initiation of the implementation of that plan, the management zones have been learning a lot about what works, some new strategies for outreach, information on how to best contact folks and the like. All that information gets updated so that the early action plan within the final management zone proposal is current and represents the existing program. We also need to include a status report. There's been just tons of activity going on, and provide that to the board so they have a record of what's been going on during the period of early action plan implementation at that point. And then lastly, of course, there's the whole process of putting the document together, a review process that will occur probably starting about July 1, so fairly quickly. This is a quick turnaround and lasts through about mid-August. And then we'll take any comments that we get from various sources to develop a final submittal by August 29th, which is the regulatory requirement. Next slide. All right, so we're run through just a couple of few slides about information about what goes in the management zone implementation plan, which will be the next deliverable after we submit the final management zone proposal. Perry's already touched on some of these. First and foremost, we have the purpose of the plan is to achieve the goals in the Central Valley region's nitrate control program. As he mentioned, provide long-term safe drinking water, We need to reduce nitrate loading to groundwater to the extent that it no longer causes or contributes exceedances of the objective, which has been established to protect water for drinking. And then, of course, very importantly, where reasonable, feasible, and practical, those are key words, restore nitrate water quality in impaired groundwater. That's a kind of a regulatory way to say, implement programs to improve water quality in groundwater over time. As I indicated already, there'll be separate plans for each area to recognize the differences in the different subbasins. Next slide. I think you've seen this slide already. There's two parts to what goes in a management implementation plan with regards to the long-term drinking water solutions. We have to continue implementing an early action plan type program. It's in the regulation. It's called an interim emergency water program. It is effectively like an early action plan. It just takes it forward as we move forward, as we implement the implementation plan. But the bigger focus now is on long-term drinking water solutions. You'll see the word prioritize here. We're going to look at each subbasin and evaluate, can we prioritize where we attack the problems first versus later, also taking into account what other people are doing, what are opportunities for collaboration, all those types of things come into play in determining what's the best approach to have a permanent safe drinking water supply in each management zone. There'll be milestones in there, a long-term schedule and the like, and you'll be seeing that with that plan. Next slide. On the nitrate reduction program requirement to deal with the other nitrate related requirement goals in the regulation. The first is to address no longer causing or contributing to an exceedance. This is done in a two-part process to kind of work through the process to slowly reduce the amount of nitrate that's getting to groundwater. And there'll be programs identified in the management zone implementation plan on how that will be accomplished. Likewise, as I indicated, we're reasonable, feasible, and practical. What is the plan to, over the long term, to improve water quality? Next slide. And then this slide here is just to summarize what are the kinds of things that go into the management zone implementation plan. This is a significant amount of work. We have to identify short and long-term projects or programs that will be implemented over many years. Some could be done quickly, some may take longer to get into place and get implemented, but we need to describe what those are, what's going to be done, who's going to do it, what's the milestones, what's the long-term schedule, identify roles and responsibilities. This is where the discharges who are part of the management zone work collaboratively together to reduce nitrate loading. And if there's also a component of this plan where you have to identify alternatives. If you can't, you're having challenges meeting milestones that have been established in the plan, what are your alternatives in that regard? Next slide. And this will be my last one. We find a lot of times we get questions as to kind of relationship between the early action plan that we're implementing now, which is the red line, and then we have a transition into interim and emergency drinking water solutions under the management zone implementation plan, which is like an early action plan. And how does that relate to permanent long-term solutions, which is the green line? And so what we're showing on the x-axis, the bottom of the figure, is that we have these various submittals. You can see the FMZP submittal is due August 29. That's the document we're working on now. Then we transition into the management zone implementation plan, the MZIP submittal, which will, based on timeline, that there's a little bit of a guess there. That's why we have a star, but sometime in 2023, that will be due to the board. That's the one that's going to identify where we're going to tackle long-term drinking water solutions first and roll out a program over time. And the board has to approve that plan. So there's another box at the bottom about begin implementation. We're guessing they will go through their process during the remainder of 2023. So probably around the beginning of 2024, the management zone implementation plan will be active and ready to go. And that's when we start working in the priority areas as we lay out in the plan. That's to be decided what those priority areas are. We'll work through it stepwise. So little by little, we replace the interim and emergency drinking water solutions with permanent solutions. That's how it's intended to play out through the regulation. And I think that's my last slide.
Any questions for Richard? As you can see, these are pretty extensive reports and activities that Valley Water and the participants are going to be supporting and implementing over the next 2 years. A lot of technical information as well as activities that will be outlined and really regulatory responsibilities that will come out of those. I'm going to pause for a second. Sometimes we do introductions at the beginning, but I think it would be great because we had a lot of people join after we started. But if we could do it, I'm going to go down my list real quickly and I'll call your first name. And if you wouldn't mind, just tell us your affiliation and we'll get through these names pretty quickly and then we'll continue on with the program. So JP.
Hi, JP Cataviella. I'm with Dairy Cares and the Central Valley Dairy Representative Monitoring Program.
Thank you, JP. John Schneider.
John Schneider, Stanislaus Foods.
John. Bill Huddleston.
Hi, Bill Huddleston with Stanislaus Food Products.
Thank you. Artita.
Martha Armis Kelly with Catholic Charities Environmental Justice Program here in Stanislaus, and I reside in Merced, so I was really interested in your comment about Merced.
Thank you, Artita. Gordon.
Hey, good afternoon. Gordon Enos with the Modesto Irrigation District and also representing the Stanislaus Tuolumne Rivers Groundwater Basin Association.
Jackie.
Hi, I'm Jackie Takeda with GEI Consultants.
Yeah. Dan Rapp, you're on mute. We'll come back to you, Ken. Vito.
Hey, good afternoon. Vito Chiesa with Stanislaus County.
Thanks for joining us, Vito. Atalia. She's on mute. Jenny Fuller.
Oh, hello, Jenny Fuller with the Central Valley Water Board.
Okay, Jenny. And I was the next one's Isaac. Oh, yeah. There you go. Isaac.
Isaac Arriaga with Gallo Vineyards.
Okay. Okay, Iris.
Hi, Iris Stewart Fry with Santa Clara University and have been collaborating with the CLA and a couple of the other organizations.
Thank you, Iris. I missed the first part of who you're with.
Oh, I'm a professor of environmental science at Santa Clara University. Could you hear me now?
Yes. Okay, and Michaela.
Hi, I'm Michaela Tran. I'm with the nonprofit Sustainable Conservation.
Gudu. You're on mute. Okay, go by Denise.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Landowner in Turlock and Balico area, and I'm also with the California Dairy Research Foundation.
Thanks for joining, Denise. Tony. You're on mute. How about Thomas?
Hey, Perry. Tom Helm from Valley Improvement Projects, a nonprofit based in Stanislaus County. Thanks.
All right. So who did I miss? We went by Paul. Oh, yes. Last but not least, Paul.
Hi, I'm Paul Huckabee with Bronco Wine Company, and I also serve on the board of Valley Water Collaborative.
And then we'll go into the room here on around the table. Alan.
Alan Reynolds, Yellow Vineyards, and chair of the Valley Water Collaborative.
And Herb?
I'm Herb Smart. I'm with TID.
All right. Anybody else?
There were a few more. There's Vicki Jones.
Good afternoon, Vicki Jones, Environmental Health Director with Merced County.
Thank you, good to see you.
And Rotimi. Okay. And then we also have Christy Robinson. Okay.
All right, I know Christie's with the Chachilla Management. So. All right, well,
I can quickly introduce myself. Godo
yes.
Atsumi. Godo Atsumi. Hi, everyone. With Clean
Hi.
Water Action, and I'm attending on behalf of Leadership Council and Community Water Center nonprofits. Thanks.
Thanks for joining, Rita. All right, we'll go back to the presentation and get everybody, Maureen. We got Jesus, Jesus Nunez. You can wave. He's our translator. He's also Valley Water introduced him earlier. All right, now we're going to go into the program update and what we've been working on. So when we started out the program, one of the reports that we had to develop was what is the potential impacted wells and populations in the Valley Water Collaborative region. GEI used a number of information sources to come up with the approximate number of domestic wells that were in those two groundwater basins. And as you can see circled here in the two basins, there's 4,390. And that is a combination of not only the wells that are above, previously known to be above the drinking water standard for nitrate, 10 milligrams per liter, but also those that are under the 10 milligrams per liter. And you can see the breakdown there. This has been a kind of a rolling number for us that we've been using in our outreach, specifically the mailings to these areas. We were able to identify most of these addresses through various information sources. So we have a pool of 4,000 people that we've been doing some direct mailing to. We'll give you the results of that here shortly. And then in same activity that was done by GEI, estimated a total population that was using those wells to be about 55,000 individuals. So far to date, and this is as of last Friday, we've had a little over 600 applications, 607 applications, and we have now 197 residences that are receiving bottled water. You can see the breakdown of the exceedances there. We have about 66% of the wells that are showing above the drinking water standard. A number of those wells that were sampled were serving multiple residences. So some of the numbers for exceedances are a little higher than the wells tested or sampled. We have 14 that are in the sample process now. Those are applications that have come in over the last week to 2 weeks. And then 22% are not exceeding the drinking water standard, but we have a buffer built in for those that are at 7.510, where when we have a result in that range, we'll go back and retest that well in a year from when that sample date occurred. You can see there's 29 wells that fall into that category. This is updated weekly, and for those of you that are following the tracking of the management zones, CV Salinity Coalition has a monthly update on their website that shows the amount of applications that are coming into each of the management zones. So you can follow that tracking through that cumulative work that's being done by CV Salt. So turn it over to Maureen. Maureen and Eva are our application handlers. They have talked to, well, there's 600 applications. I would guess they probably talked to 500 of those, or maybe all of them. I don't know. They've been talking to a lot of people over the past year. So Eva or Maureen, I guess you're going to give an update on how that process works.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Perry. So when someone applies to the program, we are able to locate their address and double check that they're not already part of a public water system, and then also make sure that they're within our program boundary. And once we've verified those two pieces, we're able to reach out and ask the applicant if they're interested in sampling of their well. At that point, we do inform them about GeoTracker. So letting them know that the sample, the results of the sample will be posted on GeoTracker. If a tenant applies, then we reach out to the landowner, or the tenant can reach out to the landowner themselves. It's just up to them. And we will get landowner permission to move forward at that point. We send that, if they say yes, we send the information to our lab. We're working with Geoanalytical, and they reach out to the residents to schedule a well test. Once we receive the results, we proceed, per the results of the well test. So we either set them up with bottled water, or where their water is good, or we let them know that they'll retest in a year. Slide, Eva. Okay, so the results of the well test at this point, as you saw before, we have sampled 171 residences. 171 of the residences are above the nitrate standard. 87 samples are below the nitrate standard, and of those, 29 samples we will retest in 1 year. We send the information to, if they're above 10 milligrams per liter, then we'll reach out to Ready Refresh, and Ready for Refresh will set them up with bottled water. The resident is able to choose between 1 gallon, 3 gallon, or 5 gallon bottles, and they can also choose between monthly deliveries or twice a month deliveries. It's just up to them. We also make sure that everyone has a pump as part of their delivery.
There is follow-up after each of these deliveries to make sure they have adequate amounts of water. And typically, so far, it's been pretty good. We've used some estimates provided by the state and from earlier experience, and it's been pretty close in the amount of water that's been delivered based on the number of calls we had to increase the amount of water that was needed.
Yeah, and they're able to reach out, and if they need more or less, it's just totally up to them. So, yeah. And we're really excited about Source technology. So it's an entity, a company that has a program that takes humidity in the air and condenses it to filter drinking water. There's a new installation going in as we speak near Ceres, and if this is successful, we'll expand and install other, expand to other installations on other parcels. And again, this is just a short explanation, taking humidity in the air and condensing it to filter drinking water, and using hydro panels as part of that process. We really like our data management system. It's extremely helpful, and we're able to not only track the residents in the application and where they are in that process, but also take a look at their residents and, or I should say the parcel, and what's going on with the parcel. So you can see on the left, there's the applications received. There's a pin for every application. And then we can zoom in and see if they're part of a public water system, and then also which public water system they're part of. We can also zoom closer and take a look at their parcel. This is working with Google. And we can also, we have layers that show if residences or parcels are part of the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program, they're part of poultry or dairy or bovine operations. So we can learn a little bit more about the parcel as we process the application. Perry, I think this is you, or I could keep going.
Yeah, go ahead with this.
Okay. Sure. So our outreach activities have continued. This is our 6th community meeting. And in the past, we've used postcards, have been extremely successful to those 4,000 residences that we mentioned earlier. We sent another one out since our last mailing, or sorry, since our last meeting. We've sent out a postcard to everyone, both in October and December. And it's usually we receive 50 or so applications from those those mailings. So it's been a great way to communicate. We also have reached out to local press, and they've written articles as well. And then Perry and Jesus have gone to, I mean, we've reached out to all of the MACs and city agencies that we can to give presentations as well, so everybody's aware of the activities and what's going on. Okay, Eva. Jesus has been extremely active with tabling events, farmers markets, public events, and then also food banks. And here's just a picture from the summer of a farmer's market. Flyer distribution, so delivering them at all locations that we can think of. Libraries, for sure, have been, we have targeted libraries as well as other businesses, and we've also distributed street signs in both English and Spanish.
One thing
In areas and to specify. Oh, sorry, Perry, go ahead.
I want to just point out one thing on the street sign distribution. For those of you in public outreach, know that you can put signs out on the roads. The county doesn't like that. So we fortunately have in part of Valley Water some landowners, businesses and such that have allowed us to put these signs on their property. So you'll see some of our signs around. Those are placed after we get permission from the landowners. So we're hoping they stay there for the foreseeable future. But you know, it's another way to get the word out about our program.
So you're creating partnerships. That's really good.
Yeah, and we've had a few of the nonprofits that have helped pass them out, but we have Paul Cava that's on the phone now with Bronco Wine. They have vineyards scattered all over the counties. And we have several dairymen that are on our board. Same thing, they have properties out in the rural areas are allowing us to put the signs. We have some on the Gallo properties around here, vineyards anyway. And it's been, you know, that's a legal way to do it. The county says it's okay to put them on private property, which is what we do.
And these were an example of some social media posts that we did early on, these on both Facebook and Instagram, and in English and in Spanish. Presentations and meetings that we have had in the last year are listed here. Again, trying to reach out to all the municipal advisory councils, other neighborhood community meetings, other organizations that host meetings that the public attend, so that we can reach out to as many people as possible while also informing the leaders of the community what's going on to help encourage residents to apply. Again, some other entities and organizations that we have worked with or reached out to and that are excited and have expressed interest in sharing our program. And so for the next 6 months, we are continuing our outreach and reaching out to entities, continuing to reach out to entities for presentations, also continuing farmers markets and food bank tabling events, continuing flyer distribution, same with street signs, continued postcard mailings. We just wrapped up and finalized a postcard that should go out on Friday. So that's exciting. We are also encouraging recipients of our bottled water delivery to reach out to their neighbors to help encourage their neighbors to apply. And I think the thing that's different is that we are now doing a high school display contest. And so Jesus has reached out to all of the high schools in our groundwater basin and encouraged high school students to actually, I think there's a few slides coming up detailing this. Yeah, there we go. So reaching out to high school students to create a display using 3 water bottles, 5-gallon bottles, and they can create whatever they choose. And the only piece is that they would need to accommodate literature on this display. And we hope to use these displays at the farmers market booths or at food bank booths, or in other ways in which we go to events and speak to the public. So we thought that would be very fun for the students. And also there is a contest associated, so the winning team can win $2,000, or the second place can win $1,000, and the third can win $250. So It's an exciting way to involve the community, involve schools and everyone associated that might see the contest, and then also something eye-catching to use at different tabling events.
Yeah, I want to expand on that a little bit too, that we have a couple of schools that we're hitting a brick wall with, no pun intended, but if you have contacts, those of you that are on the call that have access or know people in the administrative side of high schools in this area, Jesus has done a yeoman's job of contacting every one of the high schools that are in the Modesto-Turlock Basin. And if you know the larger high schools, the bureaucracy of finding who do you get to the right person at that high school that can say yes is a challenge. So please reach back out to us through the information that you signed up for this meeting and let us know. We'll let you know the schools that have agreed to participate. We have about Jesus, a half a dozen now, I think, that are agreeing to participate. We put a deadline up at the beginning of March, but we're going to extend the deadline if we can get some more schools that are willing to participate. And the outreach through the schools, this is just kind of an opener, if you will. We're going to continue working in these areas with the schools to see if, with this icebreaker, if you will, with them, to have students that are living out in the country take home some of our information to their parents so they can let them know that there is free testing available and replacement water if the problem is identified. Actually, some of the schools are going to have their 4-H teams that are doing that. But 4-H, is there a 4-H? The question in the room was, are we contacting 4-H? Yeah. Is there a central 4-H? Or I know where I'm from, down south of the valley, every school has its own 4-H department. They have their own at the district office. Is there a 4-H district office?
I would go to the district office to be able to. I was curious more about Merced. Why is Merced not included in that?
Well, Merced Basin is a priority 2 basin. So it's just the Modesto and Turlock we're starting now. Merced's plans will start similar to what we have in the year in the beginning of 2023. So we'll be going through the same activities there. If the Merced permit holders decide they want to participate in Valley Water Collaborative, we have indications that they will, and if they do, then we'll roll out a similar program there and then work to expand this effort in Merced County. So that's the plan as of now.
Sorry, dual advocacy.
What's that?
That's a dual advocacy. I live in Merced and I also advocate for Stanislaus.
Okay, we'll have to get your name, Martha, to help us out with this. Yeah, okay. All right, so one other thing that happened coincidentally a few years ago is the SAFER program was developed by the State Water Resources Control Board through the Department of Financial Assistance. And you got to go to the next slide. So we started pursuing this grant about a year ago when they indicated that there was a potential for management zones to apply. So Valley Water got first in line, and we experienced what happens when you're first in line on a new program of this sort, and it's taken a while to get the program sorted out, get the contract set up. We are now in the final stages. We expect to have the grant signed by the middle of April. So we've got about 30 days and we're going to be officially with a contract with the state. We were unofficially approved by the Department of Financial Assistance State Water Board in December. So we've actually we will be able to bill back to January 1 of this year for the activities that we have done for outreach and think some of the things I'll talk about in a minute. So we are already contractually in place with the State Water Board. The official documents will be signed in April. But we've been assured by management, the technical review was approved, then it went into the administrative function of a grant, and that has its own processes that you have to go through. But the technical approval was the main approval that we needed to move forward. So what this program does is, as was mentioned earlier on, we sample for nitrate. Nitrate control program mandates that dischargers and permit holders have to sample for nitrate in any domestic well that is not part of a public water system, small systems and domestic wells. So as we go out and sample these wells, we tell the resident that that's all we're doing, but when the results come back, if there's not nitrate, we inform them that that doesn't mean your water is safe to drink. There may be other contaminants. And arsenic, and you can see 1,2,3-T is another pesticide, a legacy pesticide in the groundwater. We're not part of our nitrate control program, does not include those, but the SAFER program is going to come in and support additional sample or analysis to where we're going to look for every groundwater contaminant that's found in these two basins, and the state will be paying for those analyses. Nitrate's about $35 a sample to analyze. Some of these others are going to add up to about $500 a sample to do the whole suite of constituents. So SAFER is going to pay for all of those additional constituents. They're splitting the cost to go out to the resident. So Valley Water and state will split the cost of going out to the field to sample the wells. They're going to split the cost for any outreach that we do for the administration of the sample of the applicants that come into our program. So you can see on the slide here how if there's nitrates only, if there's nitrates plus other contaminants, it's pretty much a 50-50 cost share for the replacement water. And this program is going to be expanding now with their support into reverse osmosis. When there's 1,2,3-T, they're going to be paying for the 100% cost of a carbon filter in the point of entry of the residents, because carbon filtration is the only way to remove 1,2,3-T from water. And because it has a potential hazard in showers and that it vaporizes, it has to be a point of entry treatment versus an under sink treatment, which these other contaminants can be handled with a reverse osmosis installed under sink. Nitrates can be handled by a reverse osmosis plus some supplemental filtering, as can arsenic and some of the other constituents. But 1,2,3-T takes a special carbon filter. So if there's nitrate only, none of these other constituents, it's all Valley Water's cost to provide replacement water or install a reverse osmosis system. And then if there's no nitrate, but there's other contaminants, then SAFER covers the complete cost of the treatments that are needed for those particular constituents. We're contracting with Culligan, the local Culligan supply store here that services our area, and they've been installing RO and carbon filters for years in this area. So they're going to be providing a service agreement for the recipients of the RO. It's going to be paid for either by a combination of Valley Water or the state, depending on what the constituents are found. Because as you know, everybody knows the RO system requires very timely service. You can't just put an RO in and let it run. It's got to be serviced based on the constituents that are there. So we're going to be providing a service contract for those systems.
So you'll be covering the maintenance costs for the
If it's nitrate only, or nitrate is part of the contamination, we're going to lease the system and pay for the service. If it's only the other constituents, the state is going to buy the RO and prepay a 2-year service agreement. So once the 2 years is up, then it's going to be up to the recipient to pay for the service agreement for managing that system. It's roughly $50 a year. Last time I heard, but I don't know if we've got a recent quote. Maureen, it's not really super expensive, but once again, only the non-nitrate contaminants, then it will be the responsibility of the resident to cover that cost. That's as it stands now. Now, whether that's going to be the case in 2 years, we'll see. But as of now, that's the way the program is going to be handled. So I also mentioned that this agreement is going to be sampled. The state is really rushing this quickly, and they, compared to when we first started, they said count on at least a year before you get started. And from October, we're going to make it 6 months. So that's pretty good timing with the State Water Board. And the grant is for $5.5 million over 3 years for the estimated cost of doing these activities we're talking about. So we are ready to roll out the program. The next slide. We've been waiting and waiting to get the contract and get all the details worked out with our service providers and with the State Water Board. So we're going to be holding a press conference this Thursday. Tentatively, it's going to be at the Ag Center. We've been able to get Laurel Firestone, who is a State Water Board member, to attend. So we've got the Modesto Bee that's planning to come, and we're reaching out to the local media, print, radio, and TV, both English and Spanish, to see if we can get them to come and cover our event. And essentially, it's going to be announcing what I've just been talking about, the fact that we're going to have this cost share arrangement with the state. We're also, we've also finalized a public service announcement that we're going to be starting out placing on Spanish language media, a 60-second spot that has our information and call and application information, hoping to attract some applicants through the public service announcements. And then also, Marty mentioned earlier, we do have a new postcard mailer with his new information. It's at the printer right now. It's going to drop, we understand, on Friday. So we expect our regular large amount of applications. Each time we send out a postcard, we get anywhere from 50 or more applications from that postcard. It seems to be in our area the best way that we've been able to get applications. We've got a few from Jesus attending farmers markets and the swap meets and these other venues, but it seems as though the postcard so far has been our most successful way of giving applicants to the program. Also, the Modesto Bee article that ran a year ago. We had a flood of applications. We probably got over 200 applications when the program rolled out from the 2 articles that ran in the Modesto Bee. So another thing that we're doing also was mentioned, but I think it's worth mentioning again, is that we're reaching out to our existing water recipients and asking them, giving them flyers and information. Say, hey, go tell your neighbors. Tell them, you know, if you're close by and you have an exceedance, your neighbor may be having that same issue. So we're asking them to refer them to us and to get an application in. And then we're also going back to retest our 200 recipients of water that are getting bottled water at this time to see if they have any of these other constituents. 1, 2, 3 T in particular, and again, if they have the exceedances of those other constituents, then we'll work out an installation of an RO or a carbon filter, whatever the constituents happen to be. That's those that are exceeding water. And then, as you saw in that chart before, we have about 170 applicants who we tested their well, and it was below 10. So we're going back to them and offering them a chance to restamp those wells and determine if there is other constituents in their groundwater that was not detected in the first sample. One other thing that we have done to that 170, we always give them the contact for self-help enterprises. They have a program that reaches up into this area, and if that resident contacts self-help, they will sample. They will sample for these other constituents. And I haven't got an inventory of how many self-help that's done in this area, but that's been one thing. You always make sure they know self-help is got a program. You want to pursue that for the other constituents. We'll now be in that position to be able to do that. So I think that's it on the activities we're doing. We have the good fortune of, as I mentioned earlier, we work with other management zones that are south of us. That includes Chowchilla, Chowchilla Basin, which is centered on the city of Chowchilla, the Kings Basin, which has Fresno, and a lot of other small communities, Cahuilla, which is in Tulare County and has Visalia, and then the Tule Basin, which is around Bixley and south of Tulare. So we meet about once a month and exchange ideas about what works, how can we, all of us, get a better response. Because we're a new program. Most people, if anyone, knows who Valley Water Collaborative is, and it's been a challenge, frankly, to get name recognition. I think this SAFER project will help us, and the state affiliation and the surrounding press will help us raise the level of awareness. But we're always looking for ideas, novel ideas, to help promote the availability of well sampling and free water if there's problems in the water. So I'll open the chat the chat line, or you can raise your hand, or otherwise, if you got, after hearing our presentation, have ideas or things that we can maybe apply, or organizations to give presentations to. As was mentioned, I've been to the municipal advisory councils in each of our small communities, and those have been really good feedback there. We'll go back and see them once a year, probably here shortly with our new program being in place for the other contaminants. So if others have ideas or ways that we can do outreach. Jesus is on staff. He's a great Spanish speaker. We have all of our materials are in Spanish. And yeah, we have just about everything we need to fill the need that we can be made aware of. So I don't know, open the phone lines here or the Zoom line for any other thoughts. You know, Thomas, I appreciate you. Tom, you coming on again. You've been following this from the beginning. Tom, we were able to go on his a couple of his meetings and talk about our program. So we have a question here on the chat is scroll it up. Or will the results from the well testing program be added to public database like gamma or otherwise be made available? This testing could inform the presence of risk zones beyond the analysis of the valley water. That's already done. The sampling is more up to date than many of the records currently in the database. Yes, that's correct. Our data, all of our well samples will be uploaded to GeoTracker. That's the state water board database that all the results from all the management zones will be uploaded. We're still working out some of the technical glitches with it, but we expect to be uploading this data in the next coming weeks or months, hopefully less, and that data will be publicly available. The only challenge with this sort of data that we have found is that in some cases, the information on GeoTracker asks for well casing depths, depth to groundwater, and those sorts of information. We are not currently collecting that, especially screening intervals. That's a very difficult thing to obtain. So we're doing a grab sample using good. Our labs are. The name is escaping me. Help me.
Geoanalytical.
Yeah, Geoanalytical. They're a commercial lab, but they are a lab certified to.
ELAB.
Yeah, a BLAB certified lab to handle these sampling procedures, and the analysis is done under BLAB standards, which are high quality protocols that the state requires for any program that is a state regulatory program.
The state is involved now. I'm just raising the narrative for a question in the sense that if there are folks that don't manage to get approval from their landlords to get their wells tested, and let's say there was a high contamination risk because the neighbor or across the street, there's already an indication that there's contaminants. Are you looking now, because of the state being involved, that maybe there might be some more teeth as to making or even dinging those that are not wanting to participate, especially for those that are living on these properties and cannot really afford to move out, but they know that they're living in an area that's contaminated?
Well, what we have added onto our application process is that we will call the landowner. We will take the responsibility of calling the landowner and informing them about the program and the potential for contamination and explaining the information described, those activities around it. As far as my understanding, and somebody else on the call may have a better sense of this, the regulatory authority of the state water board and the regional water board, the nitrate control program is managed by the regional water quality control board. The state water board, of course, is the overall umbrella organization. I'm not sure of their authority to be able to go to a landowner. I think morally, we explained to them morally, you should be allowing the sampling to occur. But it's a private property issue that I wish my lawyer was on to explain the difficulty for anybody doing anything with a recalcitrant landowner. The state may decide there's other ways that they can approach that. But we do our best to convince them this is a legitimate program and that it's worth pursuing to have the testing done and replacement water if needed.
Slippery slope.
Yes.
Sorry, there's a question here. What time is the Safer Program launch press conference on March 17th?
The press conference is going to be at 11 o'clock, tentatively at the Stanislaus County Ag Center. And Guido, if you're interested in coming to that, I'll get the information over to you. I'm finalizing that location today. So yeah, that's going to be at the Ag Center. It's called the Ag Center here in Modesto. Anyone else with comments or questions? I know Herb is in the room. Herb Smart with Turlock Irrigation District. We participated in a public outreach meeting with him not long ago. The GSAs were putting on the Groundwater Sustainability Authority. So we're continuing to try to build our relations with them and with the county, and helping in any way we can work on the water quality side of this equation. So, which is one of the responsibilities of the GSA in the long term. But we're the go-to place for problems in groundwater quality before we place water.
And we're glad you're there.
I think you've got your plate full with water supply.
I have a specialist in Turlock if you would like.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So I'm also with the Stanislaus Sustainable Community Collaborative, and we would love for you to come out and present to our other stakeholders. So we're doing more for it.
Yeah, that would be definitely be interesting to be part of it. Let's chat after the meeting.
Looks like on the upload, there's a question, when will they be uploaded?
Yeah, the upload right now, I'd say in the next couple of weeks they should be up. Hopefully by the end of March. But we're having geo-tracker issues, frankly. So we're going to get those sorted out. I think we got our answer. One of the problems that we've been up against. So we'll be getting that data up. I'm hoping by the end of the month.
Terry, there's another question here. What kind of follow-up is done with people whose wells have tested positive for nitrate but below 7.5 milligrams per liter? Are they able to retest to account for temporal variability?
So the below 7.5, currently we don't have plans to go back and retest. The 7.5 to 10 are, as we mentioned, we go back and test those in a year. Granted, there can be variability. It is not often that big of a swing, but at this time, the nitrate control program throughout all the management zones are using the 7.5. That was a number level set by the regional water board for us to go back and resample. So at this time, we don't have any plans to go back to the below 7.5. We're going back. For the other constituents, though, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to retest all these wells that are all the tests, or all the applicants who have been processed are going to be retested if they respond to our notification here that's going out, I think this week, that if they want to have a resample, we'll go back and test them. Anybody else? I'd like to call on JP in case I missed something in this presentation. JP is with the dairy industry, and he lives this stuff as much as I do. I think maybe even a little more because he's got all the dairy industry. JP.
You want me to ask a question, or you want me to do
fill in the gaps? You're always good at catching where I might have.
It seems pretty comprehensive to me. I think I guess I'd just point out that this is the first management zone, and it's really two management zones under Valley Water Collaborative that has been able to achieve safer funding, which is a great accomplishment. So I applaud the Valley Water Collaborative for kind of being ahead in this area. And I think that's fantastic. It also sort of paves the way for other management zones. So your accomplishment of getting these funds available and this expanded testing available in your area not only helps the people here, but it sort of gives comfort to other folks that they can get through the perhaps daunting process of getting the state funding in place. So I just think that's a real accomplishment. Maybe it's better for me to pat you on the back than for you to do it yourself. So I'll do that much. But I really am appreciative as a stakeholder in this process that we found a way to partner with the state on these things. I think we all are wanting the same thing, more clean water to more people. And it doesn't make sense to do it inefficiently, to have you have to go to one place to get your water tested for this and another place for that. And no one's sure who this is that's contacting them and all of that. So getting these efforts kind of aligned and working together, and I really think is great. I also think I appreciated the presentation earlier on about outreach. I think we can all agree that outreach is just so important to the success of this process. And so I appreciate that not only are you trying a lot of different things in terms of outreach, but that you're kind of studying which of those are working best for you so that you can continue to adapt your outreach over time to make sure we're getting the word out. So those would be my comments.
Yeah, thanks, JP. And he's right. There are other management zones, Kauai in particular, and that it's working on an application to expand their sampling there in the Kauai Basin, which is around Visalia. Another thing that mentioning the difficulty in outreach and figuring out what is it going to be to get folks to sign up. And you would just think free water, of course, in a new entity, as I mentioned. So we have hired a surveying company that is going to call as many as of that 4,000 residents as they can, and hopefully get them to answer the phone. And there's going to be a little incentive for them to answer, do a little short interview, if you will. Do you know about water quality problems? Have you heard of Valley Water? What is it that would make you respond to a questionnaire? Because we all kind of sit around and wonder why aren't they responding? So we hired a professional firm that does this for politics that's going to try to get us some answers, so we can find out what is it that's going to take to get people that are in these areas. And we know there's hundreds more that are probably out there to trust a newcomer and then go through the steps of applying.
Understanding that there are other groups of people that are also living here in this community. We're on tribal territory. How have you had any response with tribal groups or tribal communities? Native American?
No, we haven't. If you have contacts in that world, we appreciate it. Yeah, anywhere way we can. And are they typically rural based? Because this is not, as we mentioned, it doesn't apply to anybody living in a city or a town, because their water's fine.
They're out there.
They're out there in their rural areas.
Yeah, in the rural areas. There are a lot of people everywhere. It's just it's identifying and being able to reach out to them. I know that for a lot of groups that want to do outreach with Native American families, it's hard sometimes because you don't have a conduit. But when you have a conduit, then I think it's only wise to include them as well.
Yeah, and you probably don't even have to think about this, but what was happening a year ago in the world was COVID. And the outreach opportunities that we normally rely on, it was on our list to do canvass. So I was in a program in Salinas Valley. We canvassed 400 or 500 residents. In this day and age with COVID, I don't know if canvassing is an appropriate way for strangers to go knock on doors to try to get people to apply. I don't know if people would accept that anymore. I think we're in a new age of closedness, if you will, and we really got to put our thinking caps on, use an old metaphor, to figure out how then, if you can't knock on somebody's door or see them, how can we reach these rural residents who a lot of them just want to be out in the country because they don't want people bugging them. And, there's a lot of gated communities, a lot of big dogs, and you don't want to be sending people over knocking on doors in this kind of atmosphere. So we may try that if things loosen up more. We may try to do a couple of areas where we can knock on doors and try that out. And,
I think sometimes incentivizing outside of what you're already doing sometimes helps, because you are talking about COVID. For me, doing outreach during COVID was a twofold or two-pronged process. I had to think about the community itself and what they were going through with COVID, having needs for food, having needs for resources for housing. And the convicts, even though we might not think that it's related, when you bring out resources and combine your help, your network with others, they bring their staff, and then in turn, you're able to table and be able to discuss those things, and it means something to them that you're looking beyond your deliverable.
right. Well, look forward to working with you. Maybe you can help us open some doors. Well, that's all I have for today, and appreciate you all participating and calling in today. You're on our mailing list. You obviously are because you called in. We will plan on having some more activities or more updates probably in a month or so, and see a suggestion survey via churches better than phone. Clergy will advise how to do it properly. We have, Jesus has been visiting some of the churches locally, but that is another avenue. Again, the challenge is we're a very specific demographic. We want people in the country with a single well. So where do they all hang out? Hopefully in church, but it's really, you think about what radio station would you buy? Which TV station would you buy that would target that particular audience that we're looking for. So we're going to try them all and see where it best works. This direct mail to the people we know live in the country has so far been the best. That's how we've got the majority of our applications, and the Modesto Bee. So maybe this article, as I mentioned, Modesto Bee will be at the press conference, so maybe that'll help us give another bump to the participation.
Perry, I have one question.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I agree. We should have added churches to the list. Jesus has been visiting or calling a lot of churches. Anyway, but really quick before we sign off, just a question. How many in the room are using Spanish translation? If you could raise your hand. Or Jesus, if you want to.
You're talking about on this call, are you talking about?
On this, yeah, I'm curious if it's a few, a couple. Jesus, is there anyone in your room that you can hear?
Yeah, he's been simulcast translation.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
Zoom doesn't give you the participants. When he's in there translating at a breakout room, it doesn't tell you how many people are listening. So that's
yeah. So we're translating, but I don't know how many. I'm trying to track how many in each room, and I can't do it unless we ask. So that's why. Okay, it sounds like no. We've got all English speakers in this room. Okay, thanks.
Again, thanks everybody.
Thank you, Perry.